The chamber was cold and smelled of metal and burned flesh. The air tasted bitter as the young human girl named Lena lay strapped to the slab, her wrists locked into bands of alien alloy. Her breath came fast as the machines hummed around her. The alien commander stood behind a glass wall, his eyes narrow and his voice calm as he instructed the medics to increase the voltage on the neural whip. Lena arched her back as pain seared through every nerve. Her teeth clenched, and she forced herself not to scream. She counted the seconds in her mind, 1, 2, 3, holding on to the thought of the blue sky of Earth. She would not give them the pleasure of breaking her too soon. The medics watched their screens as her heart raced and slowed, then raced again. Her body shuddered under the invasive probes, her mind flashing with memories of her home, her mother's smile, her little brother laughing. The aliens thought of her as an animal to be studied, but inside her was a fire that no probe could measure. The commander ordered the next phase, and a long blade cut shallow across her arm. The blood ran into collectors for analysis, and Lena bit her lip until it bled. Still, she did not cry. Minutes passed. The clock on the wall showed how long she had endured. Every second was logged. Her body was weak, but her spirit would not bow. They wanted her to beg. They wanted her to surrender. But she remembered the quiet words of the officer who had whispered before capture. If they take you, hold on as long as you can, because every second matters. Lena did just that. She held on at minute 30. Her breath was ragged. Her body burned from within, her vision blurred into colors. She felt her pulse fading. The medics whispered among themselves. Their instruments showed her heart faltering. The commander gave the order to push her beyond the limit. The final surge entered her body. She screamed once, short and sharp. Then her body went still. Her eyes wide open, then empty. The screen flatlined. The heart that had endured so long had finally stopped. The medics turned away, making notes. The commander sighed and declared the test concluded. The subject terminated, another experiment complete. The guards moved forward to unstrap her and carry her to disposal, yet as the seconds ticked, the room grew quiet. One guard frowned at the monitor, which flickered with stray signals. Another leaned closer. Her lips moved, though no breath should come. Then at minute 37, a sudden sound tore through the silence, a gasp, a violent inhale. Lena's chest rose. Her eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with a strange light. The guard stumbled back in shock. The commander froze, his calm mask breaking. For the first time, the medic shouted, "Impossible!" readings as her heart pounded back to life, faster, stronger than before. Lena coughed blood, but her voice was steady when she whispered, "I am not done." The restraints groaned against her renewed strength. Her body trembled, but she was alive. The aliens had tortured her to death, but now she had returned, and something inside her had changed. Something that made her more than they had planned for. The commander slammed his hand against the glass and shouted for stronger restraints, for more machines, for explanations. But deep inside Lena, a second heartbeat echoed, a rhythm that was not natural, yet it gave her power. She lay still, letting them believe she was broken. But in her mind she was already planning, already counting, already waiting for the moment she would turn their fear against them. The chamber that had been her tomb was now the place of her rebirth, and every alien eye in that room knew it. The aliens did not sleep that night for the first time in years. The laboratory was filled with whispers of fear. Medics huddled over their screens, arguing about the data that made no sense, while guards checked their weapons twice over and avoided looking at the girl strapped to the table. Lena lay with her eyes half closed, pretending to drift in weakness, but her mind was awake, sharper than before. She felt every vibration of the machines in the walls, every flicker of the lights, every step of the guards outside her chamber. And though her body still ached from the torture, she felt a new current running through her veins, like a second fire that refused to die. The commander stood in the observation room, reviewing the footage again and again. His jaw clenched as he watched her collapse and then return after 37 minutes. No record in the archive spoke of a species that could die and rise again. He told himself it had to be a trick, a strange biological fluke, or perhaps human deceit. He ordered the medics to prepare another round of tests, this time to cut deeper, to probe the brain, to measure the truth of what had happened. Lena listened to his commands through the glass, her heart steady, her breathing slow. She understood then that they would never see her as more than a subject. She was not a soldier. In their eyes, not a woman. Not even alive, she was an object to break open and examine like a machine. But that very arrogance would be the crack she could use. When the medics approached with their blades and needles, Lena steadied her mind. She remembered the secret program whispered back on Earth, the Phoenix Protocol. She had been one of the volunteers chosen for trials barely tested and almost mythical, a gene therapy meant to trick the body into holding a pattern of life, even after the spark had failed. It was not magic. It was science born from desperation. Earth knew capture was likely in this war, and they needed their people to endure what no other species could. The process came with pain and risk, but Lena had accepted it. And now, she was its living proof. Her senses felt different, her hearing sharper, her sight clearer. She could count the heartbeats of the medic nearest her. She could taste the fear in the room like metal in the air. She knew this was not free power. It was survival at a cost. Her hands trembled when she tried to clench her fists, but she forced herself to control the weakness. The medics cut into her again, searching for clues, and she let them, believing she was helpless. She fixed every detail in her memory: the layout of the room, the positions of the panels, the sound of the locking mechanism when the guards sealed the doors. Later, when they left her alone under the cold lights, she tapped her fingers against the slab in a steady rhythm at first. It was only a way to stay awake, but then a faint answer came, a tap from beyond the wall. Slow and careful, someone else was there. Another prisoner. She tapped again 3 times, then paused. The answer returned 2 taps quick. She felt a rush of hope. She was not alone. She was not the only one trapped in this nightmare, and if she could pass words through rhythm, then she could pass plans. Over the hours, the tapping became a language: small codes, simple numbers, signals for guard changes or times of silence. She learned there were more humans and others as well, locked in cells scattered across the station. They had heard the story already, whispered from guard to guard, the human girl who had died and returned, and to them it was more than a tale. It was a spark of hope. Lena let them believe it. She let the story grow because she knew fear spreads fast among captors, and hope spreads faster among the caged. She tested her strength when no one was watching, her wrists still bound, but the alloy bands seemed weaker now, not because they had changed, but because her resolve had. She twisted slightly and felt the edge give. She stopped before the cameras caught her breathing slow. She needed more than her own escape. If she fled alone, they would simply kill the others and tighten their security. She needed a plan that freed them all, and she needed tools. The next time a medic left a calibration chip on the tray, Lena tilted her wrist just enough to slide it beneath the torn skin. Near her stitch line, pain flared, but she swallowed it. No sound escaped her lips. The chip was hers, hidden where they would not search. She had the start of a weapon, or a key. She only needed to wait. As the lights dimmed and the cycle ended, Lena closed her eyes and listened to the taps from the wall. She thought of Earth, of her mother and her brother, of the officer who had whispered, "Hold on as long as you can," and she knew that her return was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. She had 37 minutes of death behind her and a lifetime of fight ahead. The station seemed quieter in the following cycle, yet Lena could feel the unease pressing against the walls like a storm waiting to break. The guards moved slower, their eyes flicking toward her cell more often than before. The medics kept their voices low as they prepared their devices, and even the commander no longer carried himself with the same air of cold certainty. For all their strength and technology, the aliens were now living with a shadow of doubt. That shadow was her. She had given them something they could not explain, and fear of the unknown was more dangerous than any weapon. She used that fear with care, letting her body slump as if the energy had drained from her, while her mind stayed sharp, her breathing shallow and uneven, so that the medics whispered she might not survive another cycle. She let them believe she was weaker than she was, because lowered vigilance was her best ally at the moment. She needed them to relax just enough so she could act when the time came. Through the wall, she kept up her tapping with the other prisoners. They were becoming skilled at passing messages in silence. She learned how many cells there were, which species were locked away, and which guards were most cruel. One of the other humans, an older man called Rainer by the pattern of taps, told her about a maintenance tunnel he had glimpsed when being dragged from one chamber to another. He did not know exactly where it led, but it had been unguarded. That detail was burned into Lena's memory, as surely as the pain of her scars. She also began to craft a plan, to spread her legend further when a medic leaned too close. She whispered a broken phrase about death not holding her, and she saw his hands tremble when he wrote down the observation. It would pass through the staff in whispers and become another piece of fuel for their growing fear. She needed them to expect something impossible, so that when the moment came they would break. Before she did. One night while strapped under the humming lights, she felt a faint click under the slab, a panel that shifted when her weight pressed down. It was not much, but enough to give her an idea. She twisted her wrist subtly until the edge of the hidden shard of metal pressed into her palm. She had stolen it days ago and waited for a chance. Now she dragged it across the seam and felt the screws loosen bit by bit. She stopped every time the camera eye swept across her, but when the room was dark, she worked again. Soon she had a gap wide enough to hide the shard. When it was not buried under her skin, the tremor in her hands had grown worse each day since her return. She knew this was the cost of the Phoenix Protocol. Every use drained something that would never come back. Her fingers shook when she tried to clench them, but she forced herself to hold steady. She could not allow weakness to define her. She told herself that if she had been given this second life, it was not meant to be wasted in fear. It was meant to be used. When the commander returned with a new squad of scientists, they brought machines that hummed louder than before. They strapped a crown of wires around her skull and began to probe her mind. The pain was not physical this time, but a clawing pressure inside her thoughts. She saw flashes of earth burned and twisted, flashes of faces distorted to taunt her. She bit her lip until it bled again, but she did not break. She forced her mind to return to the rhythm of the taps on the wall, steady, strong, unyielding. She let them push until the machine sparked and shut down the Y. Scientists cursed and retreated, unable to reach what they sought. The commander studied her. Then his voice low as he said to his staff, "This is no accident. They have designed this." He believed he had uncovered the secret of human resilience. But what he did not understand was that the strength did not come from science alone. It came from defiance, from memory, from refusing to let despair win. Lena saw his doubt, and she knew she had already wounded him in a way no blade could. That night the prisoners tapped faster than before. Hope flowing through the walls like a current. Rainer asked if the time was near, and Lena tapped back. Soon she would not risk too much yet, but the plan was forming in her mind. She had the shard, she had the chip, she had the map of guard shifts, and she had the legend that grew with every cycle. The girl who died and returned, fear was turning into her weapon, and soon she would use it to break the walls of this place and lead them into the dark corridors of freedom. The next cycle began with silence that felt heavier than any scream. The guards did not speak as they dragged Lena into a different chamber, one she had not seen before. The walls glowed faint blue, and the air smelled of chemicals. The commander stood, waiting with his new team of medics, their instruments lined on a table like weapons, each one designed to test what no mind should endure. Lena studied the layout quickly, every vent, every door, every shadow. Her thoughts moving faster than her trembling. Hands, the chip hidden in her stitch and the shard under the panel were still safe, but she would need more than sharpness. She would need timing. The commander explained that today they would push her beyond the limit again, but not for observation. This time they wanted to measure how and when she returned. He demanded proof that this was not a coincidence. His eyes cold, but his voice betrayed a trace of unease. He wanted control over her secret. Yet deep down, he feared he would not get it. Lena allowed her body to sag in the restraints. She let her breathing stutter, so they thought she was weak already when in truth her mind was steady and calculating. The medics set the machines to higher levels than before. Waves of shock coursed through her nerves, her back arched, and her vision turned white. She felt her heart pound like a drum, then falter. Each beat slower than the last, her blood rushed in her ears. She could almost hear the prisoners tapping through the walls, urging her to hold on. She let herself collapse, her head hanging limp as the monitors screamed. Her heart was gone. The commander ordered her body taken to the morgue chamber. He believed this was the end, yet Lena had chosen it. The slab rolled through corridors. As guards pushed it without care, they joked in low voices that the legend had finally ended. But when the door of the cold room sealed and the guard stepped out, Lena's chest convulsed once, twice. Then a great gasp burst from her lungs. She was back at the 37th minute, her eyes wide. Her skin blue, yet her veins burning with that unnatural fire. She tore free from the straps on the slab, her body shaking but her will unbroken. She had timed it. She had given them her second death, by design, and used it to reach a place where no one was watching. She slid from the slab to the floor, shivering against the cold. She staggered to the nearest panel and dug the chip from her wound with clenched teeth. The pain was sharp enough to make her dizzy, but she did not stop. She jammed the chip into a maintenance port. Sparks flashed, but then the lights flickered, and the screen before her lit with pathways. Maps of the station scrolled before her eyes. Security doors, generator access, guard patrol routes. It was everything she needed. She memorized the routes, her breath fast. Her vision fading, but she forced herself to endure. Every second in that chamber was borrowed time. If they came too soon, she would be finished. She sealed the wound with torn cloth from her uniform and pressed the chip deeper into the port, leaving no sign of her tampering. Then she climbed back, onto the slab, forcing her body into the same position the guards had left her. She slowed her breathing again, letting it falter until the monitors once more showed a dead line. When the guards returned minutes later, they saw only a corpse and pushed the slab back toward the chamber. The commander frowned when he saw her body return still lifeless. He ordered scans to confirm. Yet as the 37th minute struck, her chest heaved again, and the medic stumbled backward, shouting the impossible had repeated itself. The commander slammed his fist against the glass, demanding to know what force allowed this creature to defy the law of nature. But Lena only smiled through cracked lips, her voice hoarse as she whispered, "You will never understand." Inside, she was trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what she had done. Each return drained her more. She could feel her muscles weaker, her hands unsteady, yet she had the map, the knowledge that would turn her from a victim into a leader. She let them restrain her again, pretending defeat while her mind burned with a single thought. Soon the cages will open. Soon the prisoners will rise. Soon the tormentors will learn that fear is the sharpest blade of all. The air in the prison sector shifted. The next cycle, as if every captive could feel that something was about to change. Whispers traveled faster than guards could stamp them out. They spoke of the human girl who had died twice and come back. They spoke of chains breaking and of lights failing, and though none had seen it with their own eyes, hope grew like fire through dry grass. Lena lay strapped once more in her chamber, letting the medics press cold instruments against her skin, while her mind replayed the paths she had stolen. From the morgue, she knew every corridor, every blind corner, every access hatch that would lead to the generator core, and she also knew that if she acted alone, it would be meaningless. Her escape had to be their escape. She tapped against the slab. When the hum of the machines grew loud enough to cover it, the prisoners tapped back, each voice carried through steel. In short codes, Raynor told her that morale was rising. Even the non-humans who had given up were stirring at the thought of freedom. One of them, a massive scaled being called Serok, promised that if the doors opened, he would carry 3 on his back and tear down any guard in his way. Lena listened and felt the tremor in her hand worsen. She could not tell them how much each return cost her. They needed hope, not fear she would bear the truth alone. The timing of the uprising became her obsession. She studied the shift changes, memorizing the pattern of boots in the hallway. She learned that every 30 cycles the station drifted into a radiation belt that scrambled scanners for a handful of minutes, and that window guards were thinner. The commander often retired to his quarters, and the alarms were prone to glitch if triggered. That was the moment they needed, the moment when order would falter enough for chaos to bloom. The shard of metal was hidden beneath the slab. Now not under her skin, she had used the panel to wedge it safely out of sight each night. She worked at the lock on her wrist, restraint widening. The gap one fraction at a time. She would not let the cameras catch more than a twitch. The medics thought her tremors were weakness, not preparation. When she finally tested the movement, her hand slipped free for one heartbeat, then slid back before the guards noticed victory burned in her chest. She was ready. On the night of the planned attempt, she closed her eyes and remembered Earth, the sound of rain against glass. The warmth of her brother's laughter. She used that memory to steady her. shaking as the cycle reached the edge of the radiation belt. The guards grew sluggish, instruments flickered, lights dimmed slightly. She tapped 3 long beats against the slab. The signal all prisoners had agreed upon. The storm was beginning. He slid her hand from the loosened restraint and reached under the slab for the shard with one sharp movement. She slashed the control cable on her ankle lock. Sparks flared. The door alarm chirped, then failed exactly as she had hoped. The radiation belt masked it. She rose unsteady but determined and tore the chest restraints free. Blood smeared from her old wounds. But she moved faster than any guard expected when the first entered. She drove the shard into his throat and seized his weapon. The prisoners knew their cue. Across the sector, panels sparked, doors burst open from crude sabotage and sheer force. Sarok roared, shaking the walls as he hurled a guard against a bulkhead. Raynor limped from his cage, clutching a stolen baton. Other species surged forward, claws and hands raised together. Their voices a wave of rage after endless silence. The corridors filled with the sound of chains hitting the floor and alarms screaming half-functional against the storm. Lina led them down, the service spine using the stolen rifle, her every step a battle against exhaustion. She fired with precision, not wasting a single shot. Prisoners followed her like a tide, sweeping guards aside. The air reeked of smoke and blood, but hope burned. Brighter with every meter, she pushed them toward the generator room where the map had promised the heart of the torture grid lay. One strike there, and the entire system of cages would fall. She felt the tremor stronger now, her body warning her of the cost. But she ignored it. She would not stop now. Not when freedom was within reach. As the group surged into the stairwell, the lights flickered and dimmed, alarms struggling under the belt's radiation. Lina raised her weapon and shouted in a voice that carried through every throat behind her. No more cages tonight, we rise together. And with that they stormed upward toward the generator room where the fate of the prisoners and the legend of the 37-minute girl would be sealed in blood and fire. The stairwell thundered with the sound of bare feet and heavy boots as the prisoners charged upward. Lina at the front, gripping the alien rifle so tightly, her knuckles whitened. Her body screamed with fatigue, every step a war against weakness, yet her spirit drove her forward. The corridor at the top of the stairwell burst open under Sarok's massive shoulder, and the group spilled into the wide hall leading to the generator core. Red lights pulsed as alarms wailed, but the distortion of the radiation belt kept sensors blind. The guards scrambled in confusion, some firing blindly, others retreating as the mass of freed captives poured toward them. Hope made them fearless, and rage made them unstoppable. The commander appeared, at the far end, flanked by an elite squad, their armor thicker, their weapons brighter, their movements disciplined. He raised his hand and the squad formed a wall of fire, cutting down prisoners with brutal efficiency. The charge faltered, bodies fell, and screams echoed. Lina felt her heart wrench, but she did not slow. She pushed forward, firing her stolen rifle with steady precision, dropping 2 of the armored guards before their return. Fire slammed into the wall near her, headstone fragments, cutting her cheek. The commander's gaze locked onto her and she felt the weight of his hatred. He shouted for his soldiers to capture her alive. The prisoners behind her hesitated, but Raynor stepped forward, limping yet defiant. He swung his baton into the face of a guard, knocking the alien back, and shouted for the others to follow. Sarok roared and charged the line, his scaled body absorbing bolts that would have killed any other prisoner. His momentum broke the formation, and for a breath the way forward opened. Lina seized the chance. She darted through the gap. Her body trembling, yet faster than the eyes of her enemies, she reached the side of the generator chamber door and slammed the control panel with her. Shard sparks flew, and the door cracked open. The squad surged after her, but the prisoners flooded the hall, buying her seconds with their bodies. Lina stumbled into the chamber, the hum of the massive generator vibrating through her bones. It was the heart of the grid that had powered the cages and the torture rooms, a tall tower of light surrounded by conduits and coolant pipes. She knew the map she had memorized showed one weakness, a relay junction at the base. Destroy that, and the system would collapse. She ran to it, slamming the rifle butt into the casing until it cracked open, wires spilling like veins. She jammed the shard into the heart of the junction, and twisted sparks showered the chamber. Lights flickered and died. The floor shook as the entire torture grid screamed, then went silent. Outside, the sounds of doors slamming open echoed through the station, every remaining prisoner freed by the collapse. Cheers and roars drowned out the alarms. Lena staggered back from the ruined junction, smoke rising around her, her chest heaving, her vision swimming. She could feel the tremor in her body, now worse than ever, her hands barely able to hold the rifle. But she forced herself to stand as the commander stormed into the chamber, his squad falling back to regroup, his voice sharp as a blade. "You think this victory means anything human?" He spat. "You are broken already." Lena steadied her rifle, though it shook in her grip. She answered in a raw voice, "Humans come from a world that breaks us every day, but we keep standing. You wanted to know why? 37 minutes, because our bodies remember how to fight even when the heart stops. The Phoenix Protocol just gave us a tool, but the strength was always ours." The commander sneered and advanced, drawing a blade of plasma, his soldiers forming a circle around them, the prisoners gathering at the doorway, held back by the threat of heavy fire. The moment was balanced between despair and triumph. Lena's breath came shallow. She knew another wound might push her past the point of no return. Yet she also knew the beacon she had planted when she stole the chip was counting down. The narrowband signal would have reached human ships by now, and they would be on their way. She just needed to hold long enough for them to arrive. She raised the rifle despite the tremor and locked eyes with the commander, telling him in a whisper that carried through the silence, "You are already too late." The commander lunged, and the chamber erupted in fire and screams as the last stand began. Prisoners against soldiers, human defiance against alien cruelty. The fate of the uprising resting on whether Lena could endure one more storm of pain and rise again when the world demanded it. The chamber became a storm of light and steel. The commander's blade swung in arcs of glowing fire, cutting the air as he pressed his attack. Lena ducked the first strike, her body moving with a speed born not of strength but of desperate instinct. The rifle in her hands shook with every breath, yet she managed to fire a burst that caught one of the soldiers in the chest, sending him crashing into the generator wall. Sparks erupted and smoke filled the chamber. The prisoners roared as they surged forward, meeting the alien squad in a frenzy of fists, claws, and stolen weapons. Serac tore through two guards with his bare hands, his scales glowing as plasma bolts glanced off his hide. Raynor swung his baton again and again, his face bloody but unbroken. The fight was chaos, yet in the center of it all, the commander kept coming straight for Lena. Her arms ached, her chest burned. Each movement cost more than it should. Her body frayed at the edges from the Phoenix Protocol. She felt her pulse flicker uneven inside her ribs, but she forced herself to meet his charge. He struck again, and the plasma blade carved across her side. The heat seared through flesh and bone. She cried out, staggering backward. The rifle slipping from her hands, blood ran down her body, staining the floor. The commander sneered and raised his blade for the final blow, but Lena did not fall. Instead, she straightened, though her legs trembled, and her voice rang clear enough for every prisoner to hear. She told him pain had never broken humanity, that the worst wounds only taught them to endure. She spread her arms wide, exposing her chest, daring him to strike. And in that moment, she felt her heart slow. She let it go. The world darkened, and the last thing she heard was the commander's blade cutting air and the prisoner screaming her name. Death wrapped her in silence again, but only for a while. The 37 minutes stretched into eternity. Her body lying still on the chamber floor, the commander barking orders for his soldiers to crush the rebellion. The prisoners faltering at the sight of their leader fallen. Yet as the clock ticked closer to the mark, something stirred. Inside her again, the fire that had been born in agony and nurtured by defiance, her cells clawed for life. The Phoenix Protocol reignited the broken engine of her heart, and at the exact moment the 37th minute struck, her chest heaved and she gasped air into her lungs. The commander turned in disbelief as Lena rose from the floor, blood soaking her uniform, her eyes bright with the strange glow that marked her returns. The prisoners roared with renewed fury. The aliens stumbled back, their certainty shattered. Lena bent down, picked up the fallen rifle, and with steady hands despite the tremor, she fired a single shot. The bolt struck the commander in the chest and hurled him against the generator wall, his blade clattering from his grip. Silence filled the chamber for one heartbeat. Then the prisoners surged and the alien line broke completely. At that same instant, the outer hull of the station shook, thunder rolling through metal. The beacon had done its work. Human ships, Had arrived boarding charges ripped open the docking bays. Marines in armored suits stormed the corridors, their rifles cutting down the scattered guards. The station became a battlefield, but for the prisoners, it was deliverance. Lena stumbled into the hall, her body barely able to carry her, yet her voice steady as she shouted to the human soldiers to secure the wounded and guide the captives to safety. The commander tried to rise once more, coughing blood, his hand reaching for the fallen blade, but Lena walked to him, every step heavy with exhaustion, and placed her boot on his chest, holding him down. She told him softly that humanity was not defined by fear or torture, but by the refusal to bow. She left him there, broken, as the Marines seized the chamber. The prisoners cheered her name, echoing against the walls. The girl who had died 3 times and risen again. When the battle was done and the station secured, Lena sat among the freed captives, her hands still trembling. Her vision blurred. She knew the Phoenix Protocol had limits, and she had tested them to the edge. She might not have many more returns left. But she had enough for this victory. The Marines saluted her with grim respect, and the prisoners called her the 37-minute girl, a name that would travel across the stars as a warning and as a promise, as the human fleet pulled away. From the ruined station, Lena pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the faint, uneven beat. She smiled despite the pain, knowing that her suffering had not been in vain. She had turned despair into hope. She had shown the galaxy that even in death, humanity would not stay down, and as she closed her eyes to rest, surrounded by those she had saved, she whispered to herself that no cage could hold the human spirit. The end. The aftermath of the battle left the station's scarred metal bent and twisted, smoke curling through shattered corridors. But Lena stood at the center of it all, her body battered and bleeding, yet her eyes burned with a fire that no alien could ever extinguish. The prisoners gathered around her, their faces pale but shining, with hope and awe as she raised her trembling hands and spoke words that carried across the ruin. Humanity never yielded. Humanity never surrendered. And in her voice there was a strength that echoed through the halls and beyond the stars. The aliens, who survived, glanced at each other, fear and disbelief written across their features. The girl they had tortured and killed had returned not as victim, but as avenger, as legend. Her heartbeat, strange and uneven from the Phoenix Protocol, yet steady, enough to carry the fury of those who had suffered with her. Lena walked through the debris, lifting those who could not walk, her arms strong, despite the agony tearing through her body, each step a testament to human endurance, each breath a declaration that no power could break them. Outside the station, the human fleet hovered like guardian shadows. Ships, sleek and armed, their weapons ready but restrained, their pilots watching through viewports as the miracle unfolded below. They had heard the transmission, the call of a girl who had faced death and returned. They had come not just to rescue but to witness the proof of what humanity could endure. And Lena met their eyes and nodded a silent command that the fallen would be avenged and the captives would be freed with dignity and honor. Time stretched strangely in those moments, minutes and hours mingling. Lena felt her strength waver, yet she refused to sit or fall. She carried the wounded to the transport ships and gave orders to the survivors, telling them to hold fast to hope, to remember that courage was born in moments like this, that no darkness could last forever. The aliens who had caged them before now fled into the corridors, some surrendering, others trying to escape. But none could deny the legend of the 37-minute girl whose death had become humanity's defiance, whose pain had become their rallying cry. When the last of the prisoners were aboard the human transports, Lena leaned against the cold metal wall of the station, watching the stars streak past the viewport, the light of distant suns reflecting in her eyes. She allowed herself a moment of silence, feeling the weight of all she had endured, and the miracle of having returned once more. Her body ached. Her mind burned with memories of torture, pain, and loss. But the fire inside her would not be quenched. She had carried the fury and hope of countless lives and transformed it into survival, into triumph, into a story that would be whispered in the councils of the galaxy and shouted in the halls of human ships. As the station faded behind them and the fleet turned toward home, Lena felt the first warmth of human hands helping her to her feet. The medics murmuring words of relief and praise, and for the first time she allowed a faint smile to touch her lips. She knew the battles ahead would be many, and the scars she bore would never fully heal. But she had seen what humans could do when pushed beyond limits. She had seen the impossible bend and break yet rise again, and she had become living proof that life was stronger than death, courage greater than fear, and hope brighter than the void. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and Lena stood among her people, breathing in the silence between battles, feeling the pulse of humanity thrumming in the engines of the ships, feeling the promise of tomorrow, riding the winds of courage and defiance. She raised her eyes and whispered to the galaxy that no cage, no torture, no alien cruelty could ever destroy what it meant to be human, and in that moment she was not just a girl who had returned. She was every human who had ever faced the impossible and refused to bow. She was the spark that would ignite the fire across worlds and centuries, and as the fleet sailed toward home, the legend began to grow, a story told in whispers, in awe, in fear, in respect, and above all in hope. And the universe would never forget the 37-minute girl. The end.